Here we go, episode 1 of Baseball as Intended, the podcast. It's finally here. After weeks and months of planning and years of planning and thinking about this, the day is finally here. This is Jejo, your host, alongside John, our co-host. John, good evening. How you doing?
Yes, sir. I'm fired up, man. Like you said, I mean, weeks, months of planning, but we've been wanting to do it for, no exaggeration, a decade. So here we are, man.
Yeah,
a little bit before baseball season, getting rolling. I'm excited.
It's a perfect time. Not only a little bit before baseball season, a little bit before World Baseball Classic. We're going to be covering a lot of the World Baseball Classic, but not today. Today we're going to be talking about Hall of Fame ballot. Obviously, there was an announcement there. We got some thoughts there. We got the winners and losers of the offseason so far. I think it's pretty much done with the offseason, I would say. Yeah. I don't expect anything major to happen in the next couple of weeks. But before we start with all that, John, tell us, let's tell the people a little bit about us, I guess, right? I guess we kind of have to do that.
Yeah, let's introduce ourselves. I imagine that if you're watching the podcast, anyone who's going to watch this is pretty similar to us, which is kind of why we wanted to do it. You know, I mean, when I tell the stories, I played high-level college baseball, but realistically, I played very low-level college baseball. I was not very good, but I loved it. I know we played adult men's league together. We loved it. And, you know, I don't want to say it's baseball all the time, but it's pretty close. I mean, we talk throughout the season, things go down, you know, we're watching the games and so I love it. I know you love it. But you know, we're pretty much regular guys who know maybe a little bit more about baseball than some people, but some people know more than us, but we just love following it.
I do think it's baseball all the time because, like, I mean, we're planning this podcast in the off season. Literally, the final steps of the podcast has been in the off season, and the off season it was one for the ages, right? It was one of the best off season we've had in recent memory. But I'm Jejo. I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico. Played baseball all my life. Again, like John said, we played in an adult league. I was 10 years out of playing in high school, which is when I stopped playing. I started when I was 5 or 6 years old, all the way through high school. So I was above average, you know, and then adult league 10 years later, I was like, wow, I'm old, but I did pretty well. We made some diving plays. I hit about 300. Not much of a power guy, but you know, it was good and challenging. So baseball is what I love and what I think about every day. So I'm glad we're doing this. I think this is obviously going to help us kind of like stay up to date on everything baseball all year round. And what better way to do it like this than having a podcast and talking about it. So let's go ahead and get it started with the Hall of Fame, right? Like some career ends in the Hall of Fame and our podcast starts with the Hall of Fame. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the candidates and the inductees. Obviously, Scott Rowland was the only inductee and alongside Fred McGriff, a little bit different route for Fred, but Scott Rowland got 76.3% of the votes. You needed 75 to get there. Just shy of the Hall of Fame, we got Todd Helton with 72.2%, Billy Wagner 68.1%, and then you have a little bit of a drop off there with Andrew Jones at 58.1%. And I know John has some things to say about this, right? Talk to us.
I have a major problem with this year's Hall of Fame. And I don't want people to think that this is how I am all the time. I'm usually pretty level-headed. Depending. And when it first came out, I thought, oh, Scott Rowland got in. Not a big deal. And I read a couple articles and everyone was like, without a doubt, you know, he deserved to be in. And I started thinking about it. And I was thinking, did he? And then I whipped myself up into a frenzy because it's the Hall of Fame, okay? I'm going to list some names, and you tell me which one doesn't belong. Roberto Clemente.
Well, he does belong.
Ty Cobb.
He does belong.
Reggie Jackson.
He does belong.
Brooks Robinson.
Of course.
These are the greats of the greats. Scott Rowland.
Yes.
No.
Not at the same level, but yes.
And that's the problem. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be the greatest players of all time. It is not the very good players of all time. It's not the players that did great for their franchise for a long time. That has nothing to do with it. That's an honor in itself. If they induct you into the Cardinals Hall of Fame or the Phillies Hall of Fame, that's amazing. That is not selling it short. It's hard not to sound like a hater, but I'm not. But there's supposed to be another level. And I think some of it obviously has to do with the voters. But to him be the only one inducted, when you have Manny Ramirez, and I know there's steroids and all this, but you have Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, Billy Wagner, who, when you start throwing that word great out there, he's one of the greatest closers of all time for sure.
100%.
You look at all that and then compare him even to Fred McGriff. So we talked about this a little bit. Scott Rowland hit 200 and something home runs, right?
3-something. He went over 300.
Did he go over 300?
Yeah, he did.
Are you sure?
I'm 100% sure.
Okay,
I can double check. I can double check.
No, that's okay.
No. I'm going to double check because I feel like now you're just coming after Scott Rowland. So he hit 316 home runs.
Okay. Fred McGriff hit almost 500, 493. Yep. Fred McGriff had about 2,500 hits. Scott Rowland, pretty sure he had less than that, right? Low 2000s. Just about the same number of All-Stars. And Fred McGriff didn't even get in on 10 ballots. He had to be voted in by the committee. I kind of think that's where Scott Rowland falls as well. I mean, if he's going to get in, I think he's a fringe guy towards the end that you're like, yeah, he was a really good player. But I feel like I'm a crazy guy on an island by myself for thinking this. I mean, did I change your mind at all here? Give me something.
No, so I don't think... I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he should be the only one going into the Hall of Fame. I think that's what changes things, right? A little bit. Billy Wagner, I think, should definitely be in, maybe a little bit more deserving than him. We had guys like Todd Helton, who was close.
Right.
Andrew Jones, I still think he's a Hall of Famer. I think Andrew Jones more as a Hall of Famer than Scott Rowland. But I'm going to give you some names, and I think that's where we're at now as well, right? Like, I think obviously a lot of the things we both can agree that voting is kind of broken and needs a complete rehaul of it.
100%.
But I think maybe he was a little undervalued during his time, right? I think we put more weight now in the WAR and all these analytics that we didn't have when he was playing, 20 years ago, right? So I'm going to give you some names. We got Edgar Martinez. We got Pudge, Eddie Murray, Tony Gwynn, Manny Ramirez, Miguel Cabrera, Hall of Famers, right? Like, you think about them Hall of Famers. They all have
this feels like a trap, but yes.
They all have less WAR than Scott Rowland. And maybe that's where it is, where he just wasn't valued, maybe as he should have, right? He played third base. Obviously, there was a bigger name. Chipper Jones was playing during those times as well. So I think that's where he kind of like got lost a little bit. He was a champion. He has accolades. He doesn't have the 3,000 hits that we always think, like, you got to have 3,000 hits or 500 home runs, right? Just like you mentioned, just over 2,000 hits, just over 300 home runs. I think if he would have been that second, third, or maybe even fourth guy, it would look better because he's not that household name. But he's definitely
I wouldn't be focused on him like that. Yeah, he's the only one for me to focus on. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but if they had 5 people, I could say this guy deserved it, this guy did, this guy, Scott Rowland, But when he's the only one, he's all I'm looking at.
And that's the problem. And I think it got to the point, we see the ballots. A lot of them are public. I just don't understand how somebody will vote for Billy Wagner last year and not this year. The guy hasn't played since last year. So why did you vote for him last year, not this year? There's just the steroids, right? Like, I'm not going to vote for A-Rod, so I'm just going to vote for Scott Rowland. It for me, doesn't make sense. I think the voting is horrible. I still think Rowland is a Hall of Famer, and I think maybe he was just a little bit underappreciated in his time.
Well, yeah, and I feel bad because he's being very underappreciated by me right now. So I mean, I'm very happy for him. He was a great player. It's just a matter of me of like, I guess it's just a matter of how elite do I think the Hall of Fame should be. I think it should be very, very elite.
Yeah, and I get it. I think he was, and that's the thing. I think he was elite defensively. He was well above average offensively, right? He was very good offensive player. And we got guys like Ozzie Smith that made it basically just on defense. So I think that's where Scott Rowland comes in. Obviously, Scott Rowland didn't play 20 plus years like others that, the hits and the accolades kept coming up. But, he's still, that 70 WAR is is up there with the greatest names in baseball history.
Well, it's crazy that a stat like that kind of comes to help him after, right? Like
Yep.
he didn't know he didn't even know he was putting together good WAR seasons.
But I think it's like, obviously WAR is helping him. It's kind of like the exact
Yes.
opposite of Derek Jeter, right? When we see the analytics, it's like, well, defensively, he really wasn't that good. He just looked cool playing defense.
Right.
But again, Scott Rowling, the only one that went in. Give me your thoughts on the other guys, right? Like, what about the Todd Heltons, the Billy Wagner, the Andrew Jones? Obviously, first year in the ballot for Carlos Beltran, which I think the 2017 scandal in the Astros, he was a player there, probably did not help him. He got 46.5% of the votes. And then the steroid guys, A-Rod, Manny Ramirez, 35.7, 33.2 respectively. So I don't know. Just let them in. They deserve it. They are the face. They were the face of baseball for so long, right?
It was a huge part of the game. It actually brought baseball back. I mean, I don't want to make these guys sound like heroes, but everyone remembers the Sosa McGuire home run chase, right? That was fueled and brought to you by steroids. And, it was good for the game. So now keeping them out is tough. I thought initially, and I told you, I thought everyone up to Sheffield on that ballot of the top guys, Helton, Wagner, Jones, I thought they were going to get in. And I think they should get in. I think it's weird that you're going to kind of make some of these guys wait. Yeah. I think really Wagner probably deserves it more than anyone else. If you go to that position argument, I mean, he's one of the all-time great closers. He has the flair for it, and he has the stats to back it up. Like you were saying, Jeter, maybe Jeter just looked good doing it, right? Wagner was cool. Wagner threw 100 miles an hour, but Wagner had the stats and everything. So I think, and I still think those guys will get in. It does bother me, and this is the same old argument every year that the steroid guys don't get in. We're keeping such a big part of the history of the game out, and maybe it's a bad part of the history, but when you look at it in totality, Manny Ramirez was hitting home runs against Andy Pettitte, who was on steroids. Yeah. And everyone else, not everyone else. I don't want to lump everyone in like that, but a lot of guys were doing steroids, and those guys, him and A-Rod. A-Rod's the greatest shortstop probably of all time, if you look at it objectively. And we're gonna keep him out of the Hall of Fame, and that's tough. That's tough.
It's tough because we don't know really who did it and who didn't. We know some that did it for sure, right? Tested positive, right. Admitted it. But there's a lot that they played during the same years, during the same team, including Scott Rowland, right? In the Cardinals. And like everybody was using it. And that's the word, like everyone says, like everybody was doing it. And that was kind of like what they used to kind of like defend themselves as to why they were doing it. So it's kind of like, since you don't know, nobody knows for sure in all these players. Just let everyone in. If everybody was doing it, some were still better than others, and the numbers back that up. So, I mean, regardless, Todd Helton and Billy Wagner, I expect both of them to make it next year. I think that we're both very close. I still find it weird again with the voting. The voting just bothers me so much because if I think in 2020 that Billy Wagner is a Hall of Famer, why do I have to wait until 2023 to vote for him? Like, it
makes no sense.
I don't understand. And I think the first ballot thing, I get that, right? First ballot Hall of Famer should be kind of like the elite of the elite. So, but again, voting for 1 year, not for the other. Again, some of these, you have 10 votes, or voters have 10 votes, and sometimes they use one. Sometimes they don't even vote for anybody. It's like nobody's deserving. It's like you're mad at the world.
Well, that's the thing. If you're leaving some tough people out and 5 or 6 people are getting in, it's like, okay, those votes are going elsewhere. Apparently, these votes were just going in the trash, which is probably where a lot of these voters should put them. But it's tough because there's not a lot of solutions. It should not be a fan vote. I'll say that right now. Yeah. The All-Star game has been kind of a disaster in that regard. It's fun, but it's not great. But that's a lot of elite players on that list.
If you think writers are biased, just think about fans. Of course, fans should definitely not be. Maybe players in the Hall of Fame, ex-players, maybe they can have something to say in the voting thing. But, I mean, again, there were some winners and there were some losers in the Hall of Fame. And there were some winners and losers in the offseason, right? So, what a great transition by me.
That was great.
Completely unplanned, by the way. That was a good one. That was a good one. props
No,
to
it was
me.
a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Winners of the offseason. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, one of the best offseason we've had in recent memory. I remember, I think it was 2017, JD Martinez coming off a great year. Spring training almost done. He wasn't even signed. This year, all the big names, everybody was signed. It feels like November and December. We had some big names, obviously, especially with the shortstop position, that changed teams as well. Big contract, historic contracts. Who won? Who won the offseason? Or give me a couple teams maybe that won, because I think there's a couple.
So I think a lot of teams came out great, right? If I had to name a couple, I think so. The very bottom list, and a lot of people say the Mets had a great offseason. I think they had a winning offseason. I don't think they had a great offseason. And I'm a Mets fan because you look at it, it was really close. If you get Correa, it is a great offseason, assuming his ankle's not made of, spaghetti. But
it didn't look like it was made of spaghetti last year, but
it did not. It did not. But, you did let Jacob deGrom go. And everyone kind of dismisses that because you got Verlander, but you let Jacob deGrom go, who there's a chance that Jacob deGrom goes out and is the best pitcher in baseball for the next 4 years. And you let him go when you could probably afford him, and you got now the top of your rotation is two 40-year-olds, Max Scherzer, who has not looked great towards the end of the year, and Justin Verlander, who had a career rebirth in Houston, and I have nothing bad to say about how he looked. But you're counting on him doing that, and you're paying those guys $80 million a year combined. So it let you get, Kodai Senga from Japan, which I think that's a cool move. I mean, he may turn out to be a really good number 3 starter. They signed Nimmo. They have Edwin locked up. It was good, but I don't think it's great. I don't think everyone's glossed over the fact that Jacob deGrom just sailed off into the sunset in Texas. And that could be a problem, depending on how your team looks and how he looks. If he goes out and wins a Cy Young, people are going to say, Steve Cohen, I thought you had all this money. Where was the hesitation?
Yeah, and I think, obviously Correa, it feels like he just stole the show, right? Like everybody was talking about Correa, his offseason. He first was about to get like $350 million from San Francisco. Then he was going to get $315 from the Mets. And he ended up with Minnesota, which he played for last year. And I have Minnesota as winners this offseason. They brought in Joey Gallo. There's not going to be a shift. Who knows? Maybe he starts making some contact and forgetting about where the defense is playing. They brought in Christian Vasquez. They just traded for Pablo Lopez, some help there in the pitching staff. But you get a Carlos Correa, which is arguably a top 3 shortstop, top 5 for sure in baseball, in his prime. And you know everything about his physical and about his ankle and about his back and everything. You got him basically on a discount because you had teams willing to pay $350 million for him. You got him for 206 years. Then obviously incentives can kick in for 10 for 270, but it's still a great deal, especially because Minnesota doesn't do this, right? Like they don't go out and sign free agents. So the fact that they did that, I thought it was a great deal. Obviously, added some pieces as well around him. The AL Central it's probably the weakest division maybe in baseball, right? So I think the Twins won by just signing whoever didn't sign Correa.
Well, it fell into their lap, right?
Yeah.
Honestly. I mean, Carlos Correa, I like him. He can go to that press conference and say, I decided it was time to go home. No, you didn't.
Yeah,
no, you didn't. You were gone. You were in San Francisco with your suit on. You were in New York ready to go. But credit to the Twins for capitalizing,
100%.
right? Because they did get him. They got him for a good deal. If he gets those incentives, it means he balled out, right? He had big years. So pay the man. They went and got Lopez, like you said. They made some moves. We said the offseason trades are kind of done. There's a chance they're saying they'll get Gurriel to just kind of lengthen the lineup a little bit. So credit to them. They're kind of making their own luck. They got a little bit lucky, but now all of a sudden, they're making a couple moves. And
health is going to be
Twins
health
fans. Yeah, I mean, they're thrilled, right?
If you're a Twins fan, you're excited. You haven't been this excited for years, right? You signed Buxton, you signed Correa, but they both have question marks, and that's obviously going to be health. It goes for every team, right? Every team has the injury bug.
100%.
Every team, they all have to deal with injuries, but obviously these are major injuries and major investments that you've made in your top players. You mentioned DeGrom earlier. DeGrom going to Texas. I like to, in order for you to have an like a winning off season, you got to spend money. And that's what they've done on back-to-back off season. They signed arguably the best pitcher in baseball, right? Or he's been one of the best pitcher for his generation.
Yeah,
if
you
look
can't
at
say
it.
that he won't win a Cy Young next year. He may not be the favorite, but you're not going to be shocked if that happens.
And on top of that, you brought in Nathan Eovaldi out of Boston on a 2-year deal. Very good deal there. Andrew Heaney, he's going to be your number 5. That's not bad, right? Obviously, the AL West, we got to talk division. Houston is stacked. Seattle has been improving. But, you know, Texas is out there trying. So props to them. I give them a positive note here. Like, I like what they did.
Yeah, the effort is there. Not an effort issue for Texas. You keep this up for a little bit, you probably have a contending team. To me, the number one winner, though, I think it's the Padres. And I was between the Padres and the Phillies, to be honest with you. And what swung me is, and this almost isn't fair, but they got Bogarts, and obviously that's huge. And the Phillies got Turner, but it almost feels like they're getting another free agent back when Tatis comes back. And we can all say the guy's made some bonehead moves, and is he going to be the same? That guy is a really, really good baseball player that you're going to get back and add to a lineup that has Soto that you have for 2 more years. You have Bogarts, Tatis, Machado. This is insane. I mean, this is like,
hey, don't forget
you
about,
almost forget about it.
Well, don't forget about Nelson Cruz, who's like 58 years old, still hitting bombs.
Probably 58 bombs. Yeah, the guy's insane.
Matt Carpenter is there as well. So they brought in some bats as well. Obviously very strong rotation for San Diego. The bullpen, Josh Hader it took him a couple months to get acclimated to San Diego, but he's a stud, and you need studs like that in the pen. I do think Philly won it. Trey Turner, arguably the best shortstop in baseball. Definitely top 2. I don't know. Maybe you have Lindor over him, but he hasn't really had a down year. And we're talking about next year, right? Not necessarily the contract or, is it a bad contract, good contract? It's a great contract because you have him you're getting him in his prime.
He's on your team.
He's on your team.
Yeah.
And you just made the World Series. So you made the World Series. You still have Aaron Nola. You still have Zach Wheeler. You added Taijuan Walker. Great number 3, in my opinion. Ranger Suarez might be the number 3, so Walker number 4, regardless how you want to put it. And they added some arms. And, Matt Strawn is there. Gregory Soto, you traded for Gregory Soto. Alvarado was solid. Craig Kimbrell, I don't know if he has much left in the tank, but if he comes in the 6th inning, like, okay, right?
He's a lot better than a lot of middle relief guys, right? If you're trotting out an old Craig Kimbrell in the 6th, yes, please.
Yeah,
yes, please.
So I really like what they, you got to get that big fish, right? Usually when there's a trade between teams, who won the trade? The team that had the best player. And I think in the offseason, the Phillies had the best player. I think that's why they had, or they won the offseason. I do like what the Jays did a lot. Obviously
good moves by the Jays.
Very good. The Yankees obviously needed to bring back Judge. There was no doubt about that one. Carlos Rodon was a good one as well. Now they have one of the best rotation in baseballs. But what the Blue Jays did was good, right? They needed defense in the outfield. They brought in Dalton Varsho and Kiermaier. Those are good addition as well. So I think they're going to fit in perfectly. They traded away Tio, which was a good offensive player, but they straightened their bullpen with Sewell. So, again, they
got Chris Bassett as well.
They got
and
Chris Bassett.
You were saying Taijuan Walker's a good number 3 or 4. I think Bassett's the same way, probably even a little bit better. I mean, that's just solid.
Because you have to think that Jose Berrios is not going to have the down year that he had, right, in his first full year in Toronto. So I expect him to bounce back a little bit, and he's going to be their number 3. So, Toronto, I like what they're doing. Obviously, they can go blow to blow with the Yankees. If anybody can in that division, it's going to be them. So I really like what they did in the very strong AL East.
Yeah, very strong. There's winners in there. There's also losers in the AL East. You might not like to admit it.
Here we go.
I'll save that for a little bit later. But talking a little bit about the losers. For me, the obvious one, and I know you're thinking this and the whole world is thinking it, is the San Francisco Giants, right? Yeah. And they are one of the big losers of the offseason. but I feel bad for them. Like San Francisco, it's not your fault. Like, just, you have to know it's not your fault. You tried to spend $600 million and nobody would take it. And I'm sorry, like, that's tough. That's really tough. They wanted Aaron Judge. And, just thinking in their GM's mind, their fans' mind, they say, no worries. If he goes back to the Yankees, we're going to give Carlos Correa all the money in the world. And nothing worked out. They got Michael Conforto. And they wanted to spend.
Yeah, it's not
good. It's not your fault, San Francisco. You're a loser, but it's not your fault.
San Francisco is a very expensive city, right? And they try to buy their way into some of the big free agents. They didn't. And I think, again, looking at the division, you got San Diego getting better, getting a big fish in Sander Bogarts. You miss out on two big ones. So definitely losers in that one. I feel bad as well. I feel like they're not going to be able to compete. We're going to have the top two teams. I feel like Arizona is probably a year or two away. They got a lot of young studs coming up soon. I do think the biggest loser of all was probably the White Sox. Obviously we can talk about the Oakland not spending. There's teams that didn't really spend much. But the White Sox did, and they spent on Andrew Benintendi. And nothing against Andrew Benintendi, but if the biggest contract in franchise history was given to Andrew Benintendi and you let Jose Abreu walk, then you deserve to have or get a vote.
What you're going to have.
A worse offseason in 2022, 23. Yeah. So, they lost Cueto as well, which they got for nothing, but he was great. He was great. Why not, right? So you lost him, you brought Benintendi, but you lost Abreu. Obviously, Hendricks, we just, a couple weeks ago found out that he was diagnosed with cancer. Yep. We don't know, what to expect, but obviously, thoughts and prayers. I hope everything turns out well with him, but that was your stud closer. You're not going to have a stud closer. Clevinger, hey, let's bring Clevinger. Maybe he can bounce back after a couple down years, and now he's into a little bit of a Trevor Bauer situation. What do you have? And obviously we mentioned Minnesota that they were winners. You're a loser. You're closer to third and fourth and fifth with the Royals and the Tigers. And, I think the Guardians were reachable, right? They were there. The Twins were there. You were around the same expectations, I would imagine. I just hate what they did this offseason.
Well, and it's the complete opposite of, like I said, San Francisco, it's not your fault. Chicago, this is all self-inflicted. This is all self-inflicted. This is like, I just don't understand. You're just picking nickels up in front of the train tracks. It's good till the train comes along. I think the train officially came along, and they're done for. They're done for. I really do think so. And
we don't feel bad because we do not feel bad, right?
I said it's a shame. So maybe I do feel bad. Okay. I mean, they had a little bit of a space here to close the gap with the Chicago Cubs right across town. Cubs have been down a little bit. In theory, the White Sox were supposed to have an exciting young team. They have Luis Robert. They have Yohan Moncada. And it just feels like,
Tony La Russa feels like it was such the worst decision. And I think
I love Tony La Russa. I will stand by him, but what an awful decision.
And they have a lot of, they still have good players, right? So maybe trade deadline, they're going to be able to sell and get young guys, right. Tim Anderson. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen there in Chicago? One of the big names or big teams that I think not necessarily that they lost the offseason, but they are the Dodgers, right? They spend money. And they lost on Trey Turner. Maybe they're just getting ready to go after Machado, Ohtani next year or whatever. Right. But what about this year? Obviously, farm system is great, but you let go of Bellinger, which he has been terrible. I get it. You don't want to pay him $20 million.
You can't blame him too much.
I cannot blame him for that one. You brought in Jason Hayward.
I can blame you for that one.
So you got a couple question marks in the outfield. You brought in JD Martinez, basically kind of like for Justin Turner. But you didn't sign Trey Turner. You had Trey Turner. Obviously, Kershaw is a year older. He was still very good. But at some point, you got to imagine that he's going to Father Time is going to catch up, right? So there's still some question marks there with the Dodgers. The fact that the Padres got better, and I don't think the Dodgers did. I think that's why I kind of see them as like, because they were going blow for blow, signing people, trading players, and I think they're kind of like on the ropes right now against San
No,
Diego.
this is like an arms race between the Padres and the Dodgers. And like you said, you kept saying blow for blow, blow for blow. Well, the Dodgers just kind of said, "Well, I think we're out of this for now," which is weird because I don't think anyone expects the Dodgers not to win because we've seen it so much right now, and we were talking about this earlier before the show. We expect them to win, but man, they didn't really do anything to keep winning.
Yeah.
Right? Like they have a winning culture, they have players that have won, but when you look at it, they really didn't do anything to win. And so that'll be interesting. Like, do the Padres just blow past them and then they got to play catch up? And, maybe they do get Ohtani and all that. And this is all, a great business decision, one down year. But we'll have to see. That'll be very interesting.
Oh, 100%. I think the other team in LA, the Angels, I feel bad for their fans. I feel bad for their fans because they are spending money, right? We like that Brandon Drury sign coming off a career year. Hunter Renfroe, that went out and got him. But you need pitching. And then Haney walks, and you brought in Tyler Anderson. He was good with the Dodgers. That doesn't career year with the Dodgers. That doesn't mean he's gonna come into your team and have another career year. I feel like they're spending money, but just to spend. They're not spending them maybe where they should. Yeah. So I have the Angels there as well, obviously in a very strong AL West division too, so that doesn't help them. And Ohtani wants to win. Ohtani wants to win. It's coming into, so you better trade him. You cannot let him walk.
Oh, yeah. He's out of there. You do exactly what the Nationals did with Juan Soto.
Yeah.
Like, you let him go. No one's going to blame you. You just, there's no sense to keep him. But let me ask you one more thing on the losers before we wrap this up. You're a Red Sox fan, and this is not me talking crap to you because I think you're in a tough spot. But you had to re-sign Devers, right? But you also just spent a ton of money, and your team didn't get any better. Like, this is the same team, like you had Devers last year. You know what I mean? And that always feels weird when you spend all this money to keep a guy that you already had, and you really didn't get any better. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like they almost should have cut ties, or you want them to spend more money and get back into this?
No, I mean, I think they made up their minds that they were going to sign Devers and let go of Sander Bogarts. I do think that's the right decision. If you had to pick between the two, I get it. Devers is a little bit younger. He's still in his prime. He's a top, third baseman in the league. I like that they're spending, right? They didn't. The thing is that they offer Sander a decent deal. I think the deal was like 8 for 160 or something. What San Diego offer Sander, nobody else was gonna offer. So what are you gonna do, right? Now this goes back a few years, right? You didn't sign Kimbrough after winning the World Series. You traded Mookie. You just knew that they haven't been spending. They brought in some Rays front office personnel, so they want to do the Rays way, and it just hasn't been working. Now, they finished last. That's not good. They still have a lot of question marks. They got Yoshida out of Japan. Usually these Japan top prospects or top players pan out.
Yes.
I think it's a good one. They just traded for Adalberto Mondesi, which cannot stay healthy, but if he does, he has a lot of tools. Duvall is probably going to be playing center field, good defensive player there. Bobby Dalbec last year was terrible, but you got Tristan Casas, one of the best prospects at first base. I guess they're probably going to be, platooning there over at first and DH and whatnot, but it's not good. But it's not good because of the pitching. And Chris Sale cannot stay healthy ever since that belly button piercing infection or whatever he had going on a couple of years back. You brought in Kluber, which wasn't terrible last year, but he's Kluber, 37-year-old, 36 going to 37. Nick Pivetta.
Real direction, right? No real direction right now.
Nothing.
That's what I'm waiting to see, like a path of this is what we're doing. And I guess that was kind of my point. It was weird that you guys brought in a small market GM for
Boston.
You guys are not a small market team. And I want to see that because I think baseball is so I mean, baseball is really good when the East is really good,
Yeah.
and Boston's a little bit below. And I might have just said that too, just to get you a little riled up.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and it's, do you feel bad for Red Sox fans? Because I do. I feel bad for myself. They did it. I feel like they semi tried, right? They semi tried. They brought in Kenley Jansen and Chris Martin, older guys but relievers, right? They needed to sign some arms. It's always gonna be a health with that pitching thing. Chris Sale,
Yeah.
Corey Kluber. James Paxton. I haven't seen James Paxton in what it feels like a decade, so I have no expectations there. But you're not going to be better than Toronto. You're not going to be better than the Yankees. The lineup is not terrible, though. The lineup is really not
the lineup
bad,
is not terrible.
But you know whose lineup is not terrible? The Yankees and Blue Jays either. So they got the pitching advantage where you don't, and I think that's where they separate themselves.
It's a tough situation, but.
Right.
That's a good recap. That's a good recap heading into, kind of end of football season, right? We're not a football podcast, but getting towards the end of football season where all the eyes turn back onto baseball. So, yeah, let's walk it off. What are you looking forward to in the next couple weeks, months as baseball starts to ramp up? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm honestly not many big names out there. I don't expect many trades. But who knows? The way this offseason has gone, I would not be shocked. I'm waiting to see still more WBC news. Give me more World Baseball Classic roster updates and stuff like that. Acuna backed out of Venezuela. There's a whole situation there. I don't know if the Braves didn't let him play. Something's going on there. But let's get this World Baseball Classic out there and send the best players. Let the best players. So, we're probably still going to keep getting some WBC roster news over the next few weeks. So that's what I'm expecting soon. But I'm excited. I'm excited for baseball, for spring training, but first WBC. It's going to be a big event.
That's next on the horizon, WBC. And it's great because usually spring training gets you a little bit excited, but the WBC is straight into competitive games that feel like they matter.
Because they do.
It's like waking up in the morning just having the strongest coffee in the world. Just right off the bat, you're wired. So that's awesome. Awesome episode. Probably wrap it up right there. Wow, episode 1.
We finally finished an episode. Like, we started the podcast and we finished the episode. So thank you guys for watching or listening. Make sure to follow us on all social media. Baseball as intended everywhere, basically. Twitter @BAI_podcast. So make sure to drop a follow there. We're going to be putting a ton of content throughout the entire year and weekly episodes here as well. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you next week.
See you next week.